Computer. Hi, Rishma, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Okay, so primarily we can start because Vikas has been in AI. He's 92 graduate and he's been the early entrant into AI, what do you call it, market intelligence and all that. So more he will tell about himself. And my whole idea of getting youngsters and the so-called industry veterans is across different industries to see what are the queries which are related to queries career which the youngsters might have, and if we can answer those, right, we can get started because yes.
Yeah, sure. Deepak,
So
thank you. Thanks for inviting. Good to meet all of you. And yeah, I mean, look, what I would say, right, the journey through a career is very um,
mm,
complex, right? It's not
right,
just about what's happening outside, it's also a lot about your own personal situations, your own personal decisions, and how do you corral a career along the lines of where you want to end up with, why you are in the career that you choose. But obviously, external forces make a lot of difference, right? I mean, look, as
mm,
Deepak mentioned, we graduated together in 1992. I
right,
started my career going uh, to a company called Schlumberger, and basically, at the end of 1 year, I realized, I'm more like a R&D research kind of person. What am I doing here? So left that, spent a lot of years doing semiconductor related work at a company called Motorola, and then eventually decided to be sort of more in the business field. Got an MBA here in Chicago at a school called Kellogg, and since then I've basically spent most of the time in building startups. Had a long stint in a corporate career at a company called Verisk. Verisk is the largest data analytics company, serves the insurance and financial services and life insurance world. The great thing there is it's an industry consortia. There's a lot of data that you could use to build a lot of interesting new products. So that was pretty exciting. Uh, And yeah, I left there about 3 years ago, and ever since I've been working in healthcare. And we're basically trying to solve some key problems in US healthcare, which have been a challenge for patients. Simple things such as don't know what my responsibility is, what am I on the hook for when I actually get a surgery. It's a complex web between insurers and doctors who also attend to a procedure that you go through. So there's very little transparency here. And there's a lot of manual work which we are hoping to change by the use of new AI technologies in the ecosystem. It's about a $5 trillion industry in the US, slowly becoming 20% of the GDP, which is extreme, right? There's no other country in the world where the spend on healthcare is that high. And I don't think the US can claim that we have the best results or outcomes, either from longevity or in terms of the effectiveness of the treatments that are done, right? So there has to be something wrong here. We estimate that almost $1 trillion of that is wasted in administrative procedures, which can all be addressed. And then there is also a very big piece here to get the data in the hands of the patients, right? If you believe in the future where there is going to be AI systems who can do better diagnosis than physicians, for instance, or assist physicians in making more comprehensive diagnosis, then the first order of business is to really get all the data that you have in one place. Right now, it's distributed across so many entities that you interact with. So,
So,
my suggestion for
right.
the talk was, really, I think people are going to take many different career directions and they
Mhm.
would have a lot of different motivations. But,
Right.
I'd love to sort of frame it more along the lines of what should you be thinking of? What should your attitude be towards new technology?
Mhm.
How do you engage with it better so that you can make career changes, adopt new, and basically do it with less fear. Right now, I think there is, especially if we look at in the tech world,
Mhm.
uh, they are making it sound like, oh, it's doomsday and,
Mhm.
code will get written automatically and systems will get deployed by themselves. And like, what's the need for our classic software technology anymore,
Right.
right? But I think there is a lot more to it than what is being said.
So Rishma, I think I think she's done 2 years into product management, and then she's trying to shift her career. What are and she's trying to get admission in AI. So can you tell something about yourself and, any specific queries? Let's start, looking at what are the queries or what are the concerns the youngsters have. Yeah, Rishma.
Yeah, I think it's just from what you hear from different people, it seems like a very volatile job market in general. Like every other day, you hear that okay, there's like a lot of layoffs in software development, or a lot of layoffs in, I don't know, machine learning, data engineering at least. So yeah, something that I was thinking about was how do you, maybe exactly what you said, right? Like how do you adapt, or how do you know which direction the industry is probably going in, especially now that some things can be automated and some things can't. I think that was something I was looking for. So I'm planning on going abroad, and I want to, at least I feel like product management has started getting more technical, at least if you work in technical companies, because um yeah, if you don't have a background, it's very hard to manage and to like abroad get some more CS skills. And then I'm not completely sure about where to go from there though.
Yeah, I think what we are hearing is what a lot of the product management people, I've been spent so much time in product management or product portfolio management and things like that. Right, this was our wish, right? Which basically we said, hey, can I actually describe something and I don't have to worry about the time it takes to write software or, all of the and change it at will because, especially if you're in early days of a product, what you need changes pretty quickly. And every time you go back to your development team, they're going to say that, oh, this is going to take me six
Yeah.
weeks or 3 months or so on to add this or change this and so on, right? So as product managers, people have always been frustrated with that process, right? So in a way, that was their wish. But on the other hand, so the two areas are going to come closer together, right? There was almost a wedge between product management and product development in in a lot of the tech companies. And the challenge there was that number one, it's not always very easy to define a product to the level of detail that, let's say, an AI system would require if they were to write the code. Right? I don't know how many of you experiment with some of the platforms that there, Google has this Firebase uh, development environment. There are companies like Replit where you can actually really feed in a product specification and then basically do, what is called vibe coding today. Uh, in so I think what's going to happen for product managers if you want to stay in that area is you will have to really understand and be able to break down the technical architecture a lot more and be a lot more specific in terms of what you want. And you can do it in a more iterative way, given how some of these tools are interactive, that they can actually change some of these things on the fly to the point where, right? But I look at a lot of these tools as saying that these are actually great tools for people who are in the business of understanding what the market wants or what a customer wants and defining them more crisply. Right? You used to write requirement documents in the past. There's no way that you can write a requirement document which goes into the details of every button and every, and for that matter, every scenario that is out there, right? And part of that we left it to the developers. That's why everybody craved for developers who were smart and they could actually, as they are writing the code, they can basically see, look, this is not going to work because of X, or this is going to work. Do we need to insert something here? And if it has to sit in a database or it has to sit here, if multiple people do we actually make if we are accessing this from a remote place, do we need to make copies of it? If we are going to make copies of it, do we have to, what do we do to keep them in sync and so on, right? There were all of these confusion of both technical questions and product related questions, right? And sometimes the people who were developing did not have the appreciation of the real world scenario. That's why, one of my mantras was always take care product development, give them exposure to the front line, right? Let them see what customers are saying and so on and so forth, right? The world of consumer software products actually did very well because what they had the opportunity was to put their product in front of consumers right away and actually watch them live interacting with whatever you have conceived or developed and put it in front of them. But in the business to business world, it was a lot tougher, right? So as a product manager, I agree with you, right? You have to get a better understanding, at least a conceptual understanding of, how software architectures work. You don't have to be able to go in and read your Java code and so on at that level, but at least in your mind, you have to basically have a clear picture of saying, yeah, if I'm going to partition my system in a particular way, that there is a database and there are delays involved of so kind, and this is how microservices work, and this is how you actually string together a sequence of workflows using different microservices and so on. So at least at that level, product manager will have to become more and more aware so that they can describe that. Even if the world goes to a point where a lot of the code is automated, which I don't believe is going to happen in the short term, uh, because of deployment, scalability, security related nuances, data validation, and so on. But nevertheless, be prepared for that because you would be expected to know that. The second thing, which also forces the product management domain to be more aware of uh, architectures, at least, is simply because if you imagine our current traditional software development lifecycle process that uh, everybody, right, every big company, small company adopts is, the whole idea of, code has to be maintainable, it has to be scalable. You basically have check in, check out, and systems and IDs that have been developed with a point of view, right? If someone goes, then someone else can pick that up. How do you write documentation and so on and so forth? If you are going to have more automated systems for doing that, I think we are much better placed if we envision the pieces of our product at lot more granular levels. What I mean is think along the lines of creating smaller and smaller services, smaller and smaller pieces of software. Because even if you are generating those automatically, those are easy for someone who is a developer down the line to understand, modify, and maintain, right? One of the biggest worries in automated generation or vibe coding is simply that. Because the only way that I can modify the system is by sending another prompt. And if I've made changes to the downstream code, the new prompt is basically going to erase all of the work that a knowledgeable software developer has done to make that code really usable and deployable, right? Or scalable, or any other parameter that you need for real world applications, right? So how do you really leverage the automation yet have a clean and clear process for downstream deployment and scalability, right? So the only way to be able to do that, that comes to my mind, and that's the philosophy that we're trying to follow, is to break things down to a smaller. And I think as a product manager, if you're not aware of that and how this is structured and architected, then y- assuming, let's say, you are the person entering the prompts into the system, then you would not have uh, the kind of leverage that you want in terms of time to market, speed to market, that you were hoping for, right? Because there would be too much rework down the stream that would not let you get to the advantages that you need. Right. On the development side, right? I mean, since you brought up product manager, I think it's fair to talk about what's really happening on the development side itself, right? And there is basically uh, two or three classes of new technology that is coming, right? There is basically technology that is enabling people to automate the writing of code, right? Think Cursor, think GitHub Pilot, some of these products, right? These are actually tools that are operated by developers, right? Typically senior developers who are using them to really multiply their productivity, essentially, right? I mean, today you basically said, hey, I have this big table, it's an n-dimensional table, and I want to build a function that is uh, splined to give a analytic output based on, n variables that I get. In the past, you were relegated to coding, right? If this and then else, and if the range is that and all of that. I mean, you write like a big block of code. But now things like Cursor and all, they can do it for you in 5 seconds, right? That's a productivity gain right? I mean, that was uh, a tough thing. I don't think anybody likes to do those kind of jobs. So one reason why a lot of companies are basically saying that we're going to actually slow down or even like freeze getting more people in development role is that, right? Because the productivity is going to be higher and higher because of these tools. So that's one category of tools. The second category of tools, which can actually have a very big impact, but I think we're still far away from that, but they do serve a purpose, I was saying, in the product management world, which are the tools where you can actually generate entire systems using prompts to them, right? Those are great today in the hands of people who do product management, right? So that they don't have to go back and forth with technical teams. So if I'm trying to create a prototype that I want to show to a customer or I want to put it out there, there's not going to be any large volume. I really want them to understand what the concept is, right? I want to get feedback from them and so on. And it also serves in the end as a template for the development team to look at and say, yes, this is exactly what you need to build, but build it in a way that it can serve a million users simultaneously, build it in a way that it is secure, build it in a way that we're not going to leak any data and so on and so forth, right? So if you think about it, that's how the world is converging as I see it, right? There's more of the product management people who are taking responsibility of better definition, either by writing it or by using some of these tools so that it's both clear to the outside world as well as the internal teams as to how you define your product, right? It's very helpful, I can tell you firsthand, in basically getting your customers getting them a clear vision of what, right? I mean, we used to share requirement documents in the past, but it's hard to read a 300-page doc.
So Vikas, just interrupting you in between. Actually,
Yeah,
I,
yeah, no.
I in fact just last it's a typical case. Maitri was like she got the day one job from IITs and she had a Maitri. Hi Maitri, how are you? And she was
Hi.
really excited. She got one of the best jobs which IITs could offer. And then she gets and after coming from working hard
Yeah.
in 1 year. So you want to talk something about yourself in
Yes.
1 year?
Yeah. So
You did
so
that
I was
better
just
last year, and any
uh,
queries you have? Yeah,
yeah.
Maitri.
Yeah, thank you, Deepak sir, and thank you, Vikas sir, for joining us. So I was just curating my questions, and it was really very exciting to hear your journey as well as your thoughts on product management. So I graduated from IT Delhi last year. I'm currently a technical program manager in Microsoft, and I was
Okay.
very intrigued by your career trajectory, especially the part where you decided to pursue an MBA at Kellogg. So I have a deferred MBA admit at Wharton, and I'll be joining in another 3 to 4 years. So I have a couple of questions for you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so my first question was that so you started at SLB, which was a big company, Schlumberger, and then you shifted to Motorola, which my hunch is was following the startup culture back then. So early in your career, so though the brand reputation of Microsoft and the job security are a pros at my current company, but do you think that early in career, from a learning aspect, one should join companies who are more into startup culture, or where you have just so that your work are you learn more, you work more? And is it that because in large organizations the like the work boundaries are pretty only work in your domain,
Yeah.
like there are very hard borders and boundaries of which you the things on which you can work, and hence the skills you can gain. So where do you think is a good thing to start your career? Is it on some big tech companies, or is it in more startup like companies?
Look, Matt, the answer to that lies in understanding yourself a little bit, right? I mean, there's no clear answer. No, it's not a single answer for everyone, right? What kind of person
Right.
you are, and so on. What I can tell you is, look, large companies have structured environments, right? There's a lot of
Right.
training. You understand, you do your thing, but in terms of the impact that you have, it's very minor in general, right? When you're just
Right.
joining in a particular way.
Right.
And in large companies, your ability to see the end-to-end world of, how, what's the customer and how do we really sell to them, and how uh, we build something, and what's the process of moving a product from day zero to launch, right? It's very hard to get
Right.
that kind of insight from working in a large company, right? In the startup world, as much as we glorify it, right? I mean, having been through and also created, early days of a startup are really chaos and pandemonium, right? I mean, are you the kind of person who really is willing to take the lead in some of those situations and drive the decisions, including with people who are your peers as well as your seniors, right? It takes a lot of grit, and it takes a lot of sort of mental, like you have to have a very different mindset in a startup where you're saying, look, we're all in this together, right? If you are the CEO, I really don't care. I think that we have to go down the right. So make a read for yourself, right? I mean, are you ready to contribute at a level where you are willing to learn the breadth of an industry, right? As well as influence the direction of the company? Then a startup is a good place. What you're going to miss at startups is opportunities to learn a lot of times, right? I mean, a lot of it is self-learning. A lot of it is also learning from your out of the company network. So if you're a person who has a lot of outside relationships, a lot of people outside you can bounce your ideas against and so on, then you can continue to learn. If you are more insular in nature, and again, even within startups, there is a lot of different types of companies. But I'm just talking about an average startup, which is basically saying, hey, I'm going to take a bunch of technologies, I'm going to put it into a particular industry, really create an end-to-end solution that works for my customers. Then that's what the case is going to be, right? So think about how are you going to get self-development, right? One option is you're going to read, you're going to learn, you're going to talk to a lot of people within and outside the company. Second thing is, are you really there, and are you the kind of person who can take the internal risk, so to say, right? Have a loud voice justified by whether it's coming from your experience or from your knowledge, because that's what the startups are going to need, right? And a lot of times you'll come across, right, a lot of startups would have very strong-headed founders, it's very hard to move right now. I told you, you go do your work, kind of thing. Startups are not polite environments, all right? They are, so when you come out of school, right, you have to evaluate that, right? What kind of person are you, right? Are you going to thrive in this kind of environment or that kind of an environment? Which is, but if you don't know the answer to that, then going to a big company with a structured program is always going to be helpful, right? There's at least going to be one part of the business that you're going to learn very well, right? Even within the big companies today, you still have to be pretty vocal, right? You have to, right? A lot of times, I feel, especially the generation that we are from, right? We are all pretty afraid, right? I'm not going to say no to the work. I'm not going to push back this, that, and the other, right? I mean, one of the things that I'm very happy to see today is a lot of the people who are coming out of school, they have a very different viewpoint, and they are not like us. I mean, it took us 15 years to gather the courage to say that,
Yeah.
hey, I think it should be done this way, right?
Right.
When today, a lot of the people who come out of college, they are basically honest. They say on day one, no, this is not correct. This is not. So if you feel you are that kind of person, by all means, right? But what is the goal of working at the startup is also very critical. First of all, are you going to a startup simply because you want to do a startup down the line and you just want to learn from that viewpoint? Or is it that you like that environment, you would just like to contribute from that point of view? Remember, at the end of the day, your skills being at the startup are going to be valued if that startup made it, right? And you basically said, you know what, I'm the person who wrote the core AI module for this startup. Then there's going to be 100 people who are going to be after it. If not, then you are one of the many, right? And an average person hiring in an average large company is basically going to say, I don't know what you did over there, right? I'd rather hire someone from Microsoft, which I know what they have come from. So if your ambition
Right.
tomorrow is to start something on your own,
Mhm.
then coming out of college, evaluate, are you there yet from a personality, from your sort of character point of view? If so, startups are a great experience. Pick those, where your mind melds with the founders and, whosoever is leading them. I would not suggest going to a startup which is already like pretty well formed, right? They like already have 100 people and so on, because in those cases, it's just going to be a lot of, you know, doing what you can do and doing it expertly. I don't know if that helped. I
Right.
mean, do you
Yeah.
have a follow-up question?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. That helps a lot. So thank you so much. I should probably have started with my long-term goal. So I plan to become a social entrepreneur in the field of education technology. So,
Right?
so keeping this long-term goal in mind, what do you think should be a good post-MBA option? What I've heard till now, or what people have told me, that can consult if I am lucky to get projects in this particular industry. I can learn the breadth of it in a span of like couple of years or 5 years. So what according to you should be a good post MBA option if I want to become a social entrepreneur in the long run?
Uh, yeah. Look, since you mentioned consulting, right? I always look at consulting as you're deferring your decision more than anything else, right? I mean, at that point in time, you would have worked for 3, 4 years. You have clarity on what you want to do. Hopefully, you're learning about good companies in that space or good NGOs or 501(c)(3)s that are in there, right? I mean, after that, I would say you would be ready to take the shot, articulate exactly what you want to do, and go for right. But in the process between now and then, right, there's basically I always tell people who want to be entrepreneurs, like make sure you do three things. That is very important. Number one, you have to be very inquisitive, right? You got to learn people's life journeys, what companies have done, what's happening in technology, what is it exactly that. Learn, secondly, to articulate your vision very, very clearly, right? This is what I want to do. This is the social impact that I want to have. Be willing to even think of going trying to quantify that in a way that is right. And doesn't have to be quantified in terms of here's a dollar impact, right? I mean, I want to get to a place where, you know, 10 million more children can be literate in X, Y, or Z, that, you know, whatever your vision is, right? You get to from now to then be able to articulate that very clearly, secondly. And the third thing is networking. You've got to meet people in that world. You got to understand the perspective. You'll still hear the war stories, why they started, what they started, why it didn't work. Especially if you go into the world of social entrepreneurship, right? Today we basically do a lot more of social entrepreneurship. At some point in time, a lot of those people, a lot of those companies were 501(c)(3s in the US, right? Which is essentially a charitable organization, and people had that only that mechanism to do that. Now there are a lot more options, especially like we are a public benefit corporation in the way that we have, right? It's a format basically where we say we are mission oriented, but we are not a non-profit, right? We are a for-profit mission oriented company, which means we want this to be sustainable. The challenge, and that's the reason a lot of the social entrepreneurship concepts came in, was that it was very hard to keep the charitable organization sustainable. Right, to get the good people in there, to be able to have your benefactors continue to donate to the cause for a long period of time. Things change and objectives change, and it's no longer considered an important motive, right? You have to have the courage, grit, and all of that to basically stick to your vision and say, this is not a question of the next 3 years what I'm going to solve, but I feel that my vision is a 20-year vision of solving some core problems that. So if you do the three things and you really believe in that, right? I mean, I post MBA again, the I always suggest that if you have clarity, go into the field that you want to be in, right? Why defer that decision uh, in there, right? Because we're all humans, and a lot of times we take some of these shorter term decisions, and then we get comfortable in them and say, "Wow, this is great. I'm enjoying it. Life is fine," and you forget your mission.
So,
Right.
Rishba, one thing which can you share something about you, let's say, after starting 2.5 years back, and you really wanted to shift, what has been your thought process of the last 2-3 years, and why did you wanted a shift, or I mean, something about your career prospects you're looking at, Rishba?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that when I was a product manager at Flipkart for the past 3 years.
Okay.
In the last year, I was working on building a Gen AI powered seller support chatbot, and I felt like as a product manager, I couldn't really contribute to the direction of the product because so much of it hinged on what was possible and what wasn't. And I also felt like, at least for like deep tech products, you do need to have some knowledge of maybe what's feasible and what isn't. And I really like working in this space in general. So that's why I wanted to like pivot into getting more technical and getting and deeper into this space. I was also interviewing at some startups, but they, like I didn't make it through the engineering rounds. And I think that also mirrored sort of the fact that I wasn't as technical a PM. So I think that's where it was coming from. One question I had, Vikas, was sort of how, since you've been in the industry for so long, there's been so many different, like things that come up, like Gen AI is the new thing right now, right? How do you sort of evaluate if this new thing that has popped up is something that's that's really going to take over, something that you should invest your time in, and if so, then how do you actually like go about learning and keeping yourself very current with any new technology that comes?
Yeah. I mean, look, there is, it's always a tough decision to make, right? Whether something is going to uh, really be a long-term impact or not. First thing that I suggest to everyone, and which I follow myself as well, is right. You have to engage with whatever it is that is coming out. Right now, we are talking about Gen AI, for instance, right? So in Gen AI, there are many categories of problems that Gen AI is solving, right? And the world has basically focused on one aspect of it, which is the large language models, and basically very similar form of work uh, in the image world and in many of the associated fields, right? Most of the models are very similar. And a lot of the work that has been done in the last couple of years is really taking the core large language models and putting the right, chat interfaces to it. How do you train them? How do you actually get human feedback into it, and so on, right? So what I encourage people to do is first to try them out firsthand, right? We were talking about code generation, for instance. There are so many tools that are out there. What I would encourage everyone to do is go sign up for an account. Most of them are free, right? Create a Replit account. Go basically start, uh, take a product small, write a two-page product description of what you want to do, feed it to it, ask it to generate the code, ask it to write the documentation, read through it, and see what is it that, from your experience, it is doing and where is it lacking in there, right? I mean, if you don't engage, you're not going to find whether a particular technology is really mean, then you are basically subject to the opinions of many others. And there's a lot of color in the opinions, right? People who are investing is going to make a big noise about a particular field because they want their companies to have great valuations and so on. People who are in product companies who are building them, they're obviously going to make a lot of noise about it, right? Once you do try it out offhand, and if you have been through, you've seen how it works in the real world, you're going to get a clear picture of, well, does this survive in the enterprise world? If it does, if it's really a product that somebody's going to pay for, or it's something that is going to basically become a side tool that pretty much going to get licensed at $1 a month per seat, right? So that's number one for you to evaluate yourself. Second thing, right, since you asked me the question, I should also be very clear. Your opinion should be the primary decision maker, right? If you're asking me the question, I can give you my opinion, but my opinion is going to be very colored with, what my experiences are going to be, right? The big changes in the world, the biggest opposers of big changes in the world are people who have been in the field for a very long time, right? I mean, I think of myself as pretty progressive in terms of adopting new technology, building new technology, but nevertheless, I would still tell you, I would have a lot of biases in saying that this is not going to happen in the next 3 years or 5 years and so on. But, often uh, people who are actually experimented with themselves would prove people like me wrong in that, yes, this can happen much faster because the culture in today's world is very different, or how people who are interacting with some of these things today are very more adaptable or faster in their thinking and so on. So that's point number one, right? Go out and try for yourself. That's the most important thing. Second thing is you can look at secondary metrics, how much VC investment is going, or what's the world, what's the valuation of these companies, and what part of it is really driven by the Gen AI and for what reason. You'll find in many industries that uh, they are getting a bump and others are not getting a bump, right? And you can also basically look for signals which are coming from industries that are impacted in here, right? I mean, look, for instance, if you're talking about Gen AI, like the big use case in Gen AI today is saying like customer service is going to be really impacted. Right, a lot of it is going to get automated and so on. You can basically say who is getting impacted, right? It's basically companies who run call centers, companies who run build software for them, and so on and so forth. Are they really getting hurt? Are they losing revenue today? Right? I mean, these are all objective metrics of what the behavior of the clients is that currently are their clients, right? Are they making the adoption and the switch and so on and so forth? And the markets usually are a good leading indicator of doing that. So that's the second due diligence that you want to do. And I think lastly, some of it is going to come from you yourself, right? Where do you, after your experimentation, can or cannot make the connections, right? Don't be confused between the long term or the short term, right? Some of us have gone through many upturns and downturns. I mean, notably like the big internet boom, which culminated in 2000. And leading up to that, for 5 or 6 years, it sounded like, oh my God, this world is just going to be taken over, right? And then 90%, 95% of the companies in that view did not survive, right? But some did. And then after that, over time, they did very well. Think Amazons and Googles of the world and many, many other examples of doing that, right? So if you can make a personal connection based on where you want to be, what industry you're thinking of, whether it is an industry or a horizontal or whatever else it is, and in your own experimentation with the new technology, you can make the connection that, maybe not today, and I don't really worry about whether this is a hype or not, but I am pretty confident that this new technology is really going to change the direction of the industry that I am really interested in, right? Then you can stick to that and you can weather a lot of storms, and it may not have the outside world valuation over time. It may go through ups and downs and so on and so forth, but you know for sure that emerging on the other side of the storm, that you bet on something that you really honestly believed. I, yeah.
So,
And I just don't want to force my opinion on you guys. You guys should be thinking about these things and
yeah.
informing us more than the other way around.
So, okay, so
Yeah.
Vikas, I think we can take we can plan to close this discussion. I think I may ask you for a follow-up. Actually, there's something very new which I wanted to come in, start in. A lot of youngsters are confused, including my son, what this is all about. So, maybe this video was a lot of new youngsters are coming up, will come up and ask questions, and maybe I'll disturb you one. Maitri, you want to say
So,
something? Yajur
r-
and Ravneesh?
right.
Yeah, one last thing, question.
Yeah.
Ravneesh, Yajur, you want to ask something or Maitri? But I would like to do this entirely new kind of thing which I'm trying to do, get in industry veterans and see and how they can interact with the just fresh into the industry. And that is the idea. And a lot of new guys are going to come in and see, what is the value add for this 1 hour of spent time which they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 no.
Maitri, please go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, so yeah, so Deepak said this is really, really helpful. Otherwise, I do not know of any other forum where I would have met Vikas sir. So this was really very helpful. Thank you so much for organizing this. And Vikas sir, thanks so much for being a part of it. I just have one last question for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And this is kind of in terms of like midterm, not too long into the future. But Vikas sir, as you said that you pursued an MBA from Kellogg. So, considering there are many folks from IIT Delhi who will be pursuing an MBA in the next 5 years, so do you know of any networking forum or any group or any channel that the folks like you who have done it from internationally from in the last past decade have? And do you have any opinions on scholarships that these colleges provide and anything that we should invest on in our profiles in order to maximize our chances to getting these financial aids?
Yeah, very relevant and direct question. I think Rishiba, you would have same thing, na, right? You're planning an MBA from a top college in US, right?
Oh, I'm doing a master's in information. I'm not
Okay,
doing
okay.
MBA, but yeah, I mean, I also went through the whole struggle of looking for stuff.
Yeah, yeah, because yeah, please, sorry.
So in terms of forums, I'll have to look. It's been 25. In fact, last weekend I had gone for my 25th reunion at Kellogg. So
Amazing.
there are
Congratulations.
some. Oh no, thank you. That also means I've forgotten everything. So, but let me look for you. But coming to the question of scholarships and so on. So most of the schools have some scholarships, right? They're very basic in business schools. I remember there was one scholarship in right. It was probably like a third of the tuition and so on. But most of the schools do have the ability to arrange for you financial aid in terms of loans and stuff like that. So this is something which was a big deal when I was there, and some of us got together, especially to help the incoming class to set up a loan process at Kellogg themselves, right? So those mechanisms I know exist in each one of them. Scholarships, very few. Uh, Very, very few. I'm telling you, I mean, especially if it's like a top 10 school, it's very, very tough from, if you want to get like a full ride or something like that, it's not that common in an MBA school.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, do you have any suggestions in terms of profile building for greater scholarship chances?
Uh, as far as I remember, a lot of the scholarships were primarily related to, your previous academic credentials, essentially, in those days. But what I would recommend is, right, you can actually go in and look up what the right. So I don't remember the name of it. Like Kellogg, we had a particular scholarship which was saying paid for like a third of your tuition or something like 8 or 10,000 a year, and they put up on the page, right? Why did someone start the scholarship? Right, somebody may have a scholarship in there to say that, hey, we want to encourage students in the social entrepreneurship world. Like then you want to basically think along those lines, which is what can you do? But overall, right, if you look at most of the admission and uh, scholarship criteria in business schools, right, it's really going to be number one, right? Always they think it was like you were in a field, did you explore it to the last end of the world, right? Basically, did you solve the toughest problems? Did you basically engage in the process? How did you build your teams and how did you engage with people who are part of whatever you're trying to solve in a very convincing way, right? How did you organize? How did you really create the momentum behind whatever you were trying to pursue or solve, whether in a professional or a non-professional public service kind of world? Second thing is everybody is very curious about, well, do you have other missions, so to say, right? I mean, do you contribute to society? Do you basically uh, volunteer, do charitable work, things like that, that is always looked upon as very well, right? I mean, it's basically saying that, look, someone wants to really create an impact and so on. And I think the last thing, which a lot of professors and, I was also part of the admission interview committee back when I'd recently graduated that we used to see was the clarity is very important, right? The clarity of basically what's my journey from here to, right? And why am I so convinced that I'm going to pursue it? And what am I doing to make sure that I would be in a position to pursue it and really bring it to fruition, right? Whether you look at business, whether you look at entrepreneurship, and so on, right? Everybody will tell you, right? A lot of VCs will tell you there is a lot of ideas in the world, and there's very few people who are going to drive it to the ground, right? That's why the world values when you take it to a point where someone is willing to adopt it, right? Someone is willing to follow it, right? In the business world, that translator was like, hey, there's someone who's willing to pay money for it, right? That's why for startups, getting first revenue is very important. Which is like, okay, I've proven it, and there's someone who really agrees with me. In other walks of life, it really maybe like how many people joined your network, right? How many people came in, how many are contributing to big important people with a lot of experience willing to join your boards, for instance, right? Willing to contribute, make calls on your behalf, and so on and so forth. So in every field, there is going to be a criteria, right? I mean, think through that criteria when you are trying to build something, and let's say, imagine what you're going to say about why you deserve a particular scholarship. Like, can you explain that very clearly to them with good metrics which prove that yes, you had an idea, you were able to convince a lot of people to follow you. And in terms of doing that, when you get to that there were really people who thought of it and adopted what you had, whether by being customers, whether by being partners, or whether helping you as a team.
All right,
Mhm.
Vikas, I think you
Right.
would also have been tired.
Yeah.
Lot of discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, let's maybe in the next call, maybe more and more youngsters will join, and and they will be able to ask questions directly from you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
No
Vikas,
worries.
for your
Yeah,
valuable
Thank
good.
time.
Yeah. Thank you so
That's
much.
great.
Thank you so much, Vikas sir. Thank you so much, Deepak sir. Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Jagdish. Thanks, Jude, for joining. Bye. Thanks a lot, Vikas.
Bye.
So it's a new thing which we are trying to do. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great,
These some
great
youngsters
idea.
are like amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Their
very useful. Yeah,
maturity is amazing, right?
yeah. Like
Yeah.
Vikas said, their thought process is completely different than what we used to have as
Yeah.
youngsters, and
Yeah,
that's law of
exactly.
evolution. That's the way it should be, and we also learn a lot from that. Thank you. Thanks,
Yes.
Vikas. Thank you, Deepak.
All
See you
right.
Good to
later.
see you, buddy.
See you.
Yep.
Chalo,
Bye.
फिर. Thanks a lot, Vikas.
Chalo.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Chalo ji. Thank you.